Hello, good morning. Welcome to our latest deep dive webinar series. I'm delighted today that we're going to look a bit deeper at Mifos Gazelle. It's been a topic of quite some conversation over the last few months since the launch in December. And I'm delighted that we've got Tom Daly with us this morning or this evening for Tom. He will be able to take us through a lot more detail. We're going to have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. You'll notice there is a Q&A facility in the webinar, so please type your questions in there as you go along, and we'll make sure we've got plenty of time at the end of the call to go through and answer any questions that have come up. Without any further ado, welcome to Tom. I'll hand over to you to take us through.
Thanks, David. And just remind me, the call scheduled for an hour, David?
Yeah, it's scheduled for an hour. Yeah.
An hour. Okay, that's right. So if I lose track of time because I get excited, please feel free to interrupt. Because I am actually quite passionate about this project, folks. So yeah, hi, I'm Tom Daly, and I've been contributing to DevOps, of which I guess Mifos Gazelle is highly related to here at Mifos. So thanks for joining. I'm actually in Australia, and I'm going to migrate to my big screen in a minute, so I'm going to turn my video off. But I just wanted to say hello and show you my mug. So let me bring up the slides and let's kick off. Give me 1 second. I'll share my screen and we'll share PowerPoint. And I should be able to go play from start. And hopefully everybody can see the screen, just the slides. So where are we headed? Essentially, give you an overview of what Mifos Gazelle is. If you're here, you might know already what it is, so we won't labour it too much. And I've stolen most of David's slides here, or reusing them. And so some of this is a little bit of history, and the meat is going to be around about where are we, which is the current state of Mifos, what we're planning. And then really, I'm going to spend most of the time that we have together in the Code Visual Studio in my workbench there, just trying to show you what we've got and show you the opportunities. And hopefully you'll get a feel for the value and why I say I'm pretty excited about the project. We'll talk about the opportunities for end users and allowing other digital public good or digital public good providers to participate with Mifos Gazelle, and then try and get you started if any of this is actually interesting to you. So essentially, it's a package solution, and currently Mifos Gazelle is a set of bash scripts really that utilize and deploy and integrate existing digital public goods. Currently, it's Mifos X, which is Mifos plus the web client. It is Payment Hub Enterprise Edition, or Payment Hub EE, and Modular V Next Beta 1, which is a financial services switch, allowing the switching of payments between different financial institutions. And the idea here was, can we do something really simple, really quick, that is a greater benefit than the sum of the parts? And a little bit of history will probably explain that, or hopefully give you some idea. Was working with an earlier version of Modular Loop Switch, And I packaged it up, and we'd given a little bit of a demo of just a little bit of what it could do in demo mode. And then I asked my son, well, what do we do now? What do we want customers to actually do? They've got a piece of software installed, they've got it running. And his idea was to actually integrate the financial services switch with Mifos, the core banking. And Ed Cable and I happened to be at a conference, and Ed liked that idea, and he set up a Google Summer of Code that Elijah Okello, who's in Uganda, took the first attempt at this and actually created much of what we're going to be looking at today. And then we basically started to see, as we got this workbench, this lab for Mifos, for vNext, and for Mifos X, we started to realize, I think with some of Ed and David's prompting, really, they started to realize that this could be a lot more than just a simple demo idea for the three products, but actually could form some sort of platform. And the reason that's true is because we're lowering barriers to entry with speedy deployment, and we haven't got the canned demos yet. That's anticipated for the next release for our. I think we're going to call it a 2.0 release. We released 1.0 in November, and I just realised some people might be having trouble understanding me because I talk quickly. So somebody cough or something, if I do get excited, but I'll try and slow down so that I can be a little bit more easily understood. As I was saying, we've released 1.0, and that deploys those three products in about, well, depending on your environment, but probably somewhere between 5 and 15 minutes. All three products are up and stable and running in Kubernetes. The idea is that you simplify the deployment so much, and we're going to look at how simplified that is, but you do absolutely everything that you can to automate so that the user doesn't have to understand much or know much to replicate the environment and the end outcome. This will make more sense in a minute. So as we said, there's currently Payment Hub EE, Mifos X, the core banking, and the vNext beta payment switch. And currently it's on 32 gig machine, and let's say full installation on 15 minutes. I don't know. So one organization I've been working with, they have a very old machine and it takes a little bit longer, but they seem to be pretty happy with the way it works on there as well. Old Opteron processors, actually, for anybody old enough to remember those. It's very easy to run, and you'll see in a minute. It's essentially one command installer. If you like, it's digital public infrastructure in a box. It's lightweight, and we're going to make it more lightweight for test and development. And yet there's no reason, and in fact, Elijah in an earlier version did have it actually running on Azure, well, Elijah and I. So there's absolutely no reason why it can't run on managed cloud. It could run on OpenStack. It could run wherever your Kubernetes or your infrastructure is. And we'll talk about some of the assumptions that we've currently got, and hopefully it will be a conversation starter as we talk about what we're currently thinking and start to test those assumptions with what other people and other organizations might need for their products and for their customer bases. It really is about time to install and simplicity, and about integration of the products so that each of the DPGs can be used in demo scenarios so that end user customers, students, governments, regulators can actually see the deployment without having to spend lots and lots of dollars to actually put these things in the cloud or in complex deployments, and then spend lots and lots of time deploying and integrating them. The value add here at runtime is the integration. The value add in deployment is actually the simplicity of the deployment, but at runtime, it's the integration. So that's sort of enough talking about, or intro. Let's go and actually sort of look at Mifos Gazelle, and I'll stop sharing that. I'm going to have to bounce around a little bit with sharing because I've got a very big screen, and if anybody's on a small screen, I'm just conscious they won't be able to read it. So I'm going to share one thing at a time, which means that I'll stop sharing and reshare. So come over to Firefox. You'll find Mifos Gazelle in the Mifos GitHub repo. And the easiest way to look for that is open MF GitHub Mifos Gazelle. And we actually have, as we said, we've got one release, the 1.0 release. But the reason for coming here is to show you the docs. And we're going to go to the Mifos Gazelle README. This top level doc just gives you an idea of what is actually in Mifos Gazelle. And it really is configuration. It is performance testing, which we're not using yet for some of the components. It's a Postman set of collections, which we're working on, and some Postman input for testing. This repos doesn't exactly exist as part of Gazelle, and I'll explain that. And then there's the source directory. And that's really, if you like, this is the substance, the main, this is where the action happens with Mifos Gazelle. So let's go back and look at the Mifos Gazelle README, because this is where you want to start. And you can click on the quick start. And the reason for showing you this is once you've got an Ubuntu machine, 24.0.02 or similar, it's basically git clone this repo that we're looking at now, right? Or a latest development. Let's say we're going to get the release. And then you CD to what you change your working directory to what you just checked out, what you just cloned. And then if you run that single command, sudo run.shell -u, the user that you're logged in as, -m deploy for deploying all the products, debug true, and all. You can actually simplify this to, sudo run.shell -u $user -m deploy, and that will deploy Mifos Gazelle for you. When I say deploy Mifos Gazelle, it will deploy everything that the operating system needs. It will install the Kubernetes and configure the Kubernetes cluster. It will install the Nginx gateway and Nginx ingress controller and configure it. It will install Helm, Docker, It will install K9s for monitoring the cluster. Essentially, everything you need to run those initial 3 digital public goods is installed and configured from that command. So it's essentially git clone and run.sh. That really, when we say simple, that's really what we mean, is that if you want to install Mifos Gazelle, if you want to install those 3 DPGs, then that's all you need to do. I think you get the idea. I'm laboring it, but simplicity in deployment is really a big part of the goal, and we're going to labor to keep it very simple, even as we integrate further products. Okay, I said I'm going to bounce around. Let's go and have a look at the product of running that run.sh. So here's my, whoops, let me share. And this time it's going to be code. And this is, in fact, I will close down some of these. You can see we're actively working on Mifos Gazelle. And Mifos Gazelle is this one. This is currently my dev branch that I'm working on, separate from everything else. And as I say, these repos are actually cloned at runtime. And to show you, if I can show you in here without swapping terminals again, bear with me if this works. It should. So, because that run.sh also installs the K9s utility for monitoring Kubernetes clusters. And so, as I mentioned, the Kubernetes cluster is installed by the run.shell command. And this is what you end up with in the Kubernetes cluster. So I'm going to go 0. You end up with the ingress controller, and in our case, Prometheus for monitoring series data and setting up for doing performance monitoring. We're not using that yet, but it's there in preparation. And then the infrastructure layer. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more when we get to Q&A and integration. And you can see in the infrastructure layer, which is shared, we've got things like Elasticsearch and Kibana, Kafka, Mongo, currently MySQL, that will be a discussion point, Redis, and then we've got Zookeeper, and we've got some things for console for MongoDB, and I think there's a Kafka console as well that you can enable. This is actually the Kubernetes cluster core services plus the ingress controller. Then we get to the digital public goods, Mifos X. These are the, and you'll notice that everything, if you are familiar with Kubernetes, and cloud native apps, you'll notice that everything is installed into its own namespace. We are doing demo and labs and experiment research at the moment, but one of the things that putting everything in its own namespace can do is enable us to put firewalls between the namespace using a product that is just gone from my head right at the moment, part of the Kubernetes stack. And we can actually secure each namespace and then open up just small pipes between them for security. So this is looking forward to a more production-like environment. And then you'll see Payment Hub EE namespace with all of the services. Now there is a duplication here. we're getting rid of that. We will use the Kafka from the infrastructure service. That's something I'm working on right at the moment. And similarly with this MySQL, that will be merged into infrastructure very shortly as well. And this matters because as we're doing that, we're saving more and more memory. In fact, when we first started, it was difficult to get everything into 32 gigabytes. You can see this is a full cluster running with vNext, with Payment Hub EE and Mifos. And you can see that we're using 81% of 32 gigabytes. We anticipate, I measured it, there's no reason this shouldn't be able to be run, these three components, there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to be run in 16 gigabytes. So there's all the payment hub. There are some some services that aren't Mifos code here. There's the ZB workflow cluster. So this is BPMN workflow. And that may be the sort of thing that we could put in its own shared workspace if we have other people using BPMN or perhaps other workflow engines. And then there's the vNext switch. And we also installing by doing this, and you'll have to bear with me as I bounce around again. But I'm going to go to Firefox. So that's the cluster, that's everything up and running. And as I said, that takes about, anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes to install. And I go to Firefox, you'll see that we can actually now log in to our cluster. This is actually running into the Mifos core banking system. And you can see I've been working on it and been adding clients and actually working on integrating the core banking with the vNext switch. So what do they call it? Admin. Oh no, it's vNext admin. vNext admin. We can log into that. So I'm just trying to give you a feel for the results of running run.sh. So this is the vNext. So I showed you Mifos. That's the vNext switch. And similarly, we've got a console for Payment Hub EE as well, the operations console. So what else was going back to, just for the moment, going back to code and looking at our workspace. Bring this back down. Actually, I'll just Control C out of that. The other thing that we're trying to do as we go is to create convenience methods. So I just showed you logging into Mifos X as Greenbank, which is going to be one of our test banks and our demo customers, our demo banks. And there's quite a process to actually add tenants to the Mifos X installation, to the database. It's reasonably straightforward, but it has a lot of steps. It has a number of steps, and you've got to connect to your MySQL database or your PostgreSQL. You've essentially got to connect to the Mifos database. So what I'm trying to do as well is to collect all of these utility functions so that you can work very easily with the products once they're installed. So this update Mifos tenants is just a shell script. And I should mention, we make extensive use of shell script because then you don't have to install anything else to get going. You don't have to install a JDK for Java. You don't have to install a Docker to get going. In fact, the shell script does everything else for you. So it meant that as long as you have the operating system, then we can actually set up the entire environment and make sure it works 10 times out of 10. But just to show you, I have a script here that actually collects all of the Kubernetes logs and enables you to search them all. So you can figure out across the whole cluster if there's a pod or an image, a container not working properly. The update script, sorry, I didn't finish my statement on that. This will add tenants for you. And you simply add into the config, you simply add the you simply add a line to the CSV file and you run that update, and then in 10 minutes or so that you have your tenants actually added to the core banking software, and you'll be able to log in as that tenant. And you saw me just log in as Greenbank. So that's not a default tenant, but it's all packaged. Oh, similarly, all of the demo data is loaded for vNext. And this is a really important point, is that when we get to the 2.0 release and subsequently, that when you've run that run.sh script, all of the data will be there for the end-to-end demonstrations as well. And that's really important. And we do that, and I'm going to just show you really the whole of the activity is actually within these 3 or 4 scripts. There's the command line script that actually takes the command line parameters. You'll see it's actually not very big. That's it. There's the configuration manager that actually makes sure that you're installing Helm, MySQL, passwords. This is all about the environment and the configuration of things that are being deployed in the environment and shared things. And really this script here, which is what it's just a series of bash functions, 720. A lot of this is comment, some things still to do. That's really how simple Mifos Gazelle is. I think I should pause just really quickly. David, do you think that's a good point just to prompt for any questions and take questions for a couple of minutes? If there's any technical questions that anybody has about Mifos Gazelle, or is there anything I might have missed that I should cover?
Yeah, certainly. We've already got some questions, but if you've got any more questions, please put them in the Q&A. So our first question comes from Laban. He says, how do the Postman collections work?
From Postman. Yes, I actually have. So you still need the Postman. You still need to import the collections to Postman and run them, or I think yes. And what we're doing is, and in fact, let me show you. I can go to Postman and I can share. I do apologize about the bouncing around, but it'll be too small for anybody on a small screen. So what we're working on and making some progress is a Gazelle Postman collection. So I'm synthesizing it from the Mifos collection and the Modular V-Next collection. And what there will be is, and we have a Jira ticket for this. We'll see that in a minute. But we'll actually have one collection that basically enables you to run a set of tests across Mifos, VNext, and Payment Hub EE. And most importantly, we'll have an environment, a Mifos Gazelle domain environment that works with that collection. So it's going to be a subset of all the other collections. So if a product has its own collection, we're sort of subsetting that to create a simple demo environment and Postman sort of environment for people to be able to both test, but also, really importantly, to understand. Because if you can make the REST calls to particular endpoints and look at the responses, that really aids understanding. I hope that answers that question. That's very much a work in process, but I hope you get the idea.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tom. And I think that's, it's a good segue into the fact that we do have tickets. I know you'll cover it in a minute as well. But also we're actively looking people to help us improve things such as our postman collections. The next question we've got is, what are the considerations for security mechanisms within Mifos Gazelle?
Yeah. For anybody who's seen the Hollywood movie The Karate Kid, security, you know that security you either do, it's sort of karate do yes or karate do no if you're old enough to remember the movie. But basically it's security is something you don't do halfway. And so we have that in mind, and we are have a view that we will have a security. David, I think you could probably speak to this as well, and correct me if I'm wrong. A security bill of materials, and we will have a profile, and we'll talk about profiles shortly. That will be a much more production ready. Now, I need to be careful here. I don't think with some of these financial technology products that you can install them without having your own security experts, your own secure environments. But what Mifos Gazelle can do is give you a head start where the default install actually will give you a profile where we have actually a good level of security, but you will still, before you put real money or you put real transactions through, it's a starter and it's a helper. It's to give a really good start on a production deployment. It is not to do a production deployment without the appropriate expertise. So short answer.
And I think that's is a good point. At the moment, we haven't really looked at the security in great detail within Mifos Gazelle, but equally at the moment we don't recommend it for production environment deployment. So it's designed for proof of concept, and test environments and things like that, where you make some of those sacrifices at that point in time. But it is something that we will be looking at more in the roadmap as we want to consider sort of production deployments out of Mifos Gazelle.
Yeah, and that's what I guess I'm being old-fashioned when I was referring to the Karate Kid movie, but to state it in plain terms, you do security very well, or you just don't do it at all, and you make sure that what you're creating is demo, research, basically throwaway environments that are known to be insecure, and therefore no business and no risk is associated with them. And currently, very importantly, that's where Mifos Gazelle is, the way it deploys the products. I hope that's
Excellent.
really clear, but I'm really glad of the question because it's very important.
Excellent. Moving on to our next question, Godfrey asks, Tom, using a 16 gigabyte RAM machine, have you tested the performance in TPS for each DPG?
No, individual products are tested. And David, you might want to talk to this a little bit about what Mifos Gazelle is doing is combining the products. So what you're asking there, Godfrey, is have we done end-to-end testing and actually tested the things that we're going to demo? The answer is no, but are we interested in doing some of that? Yes, not performance testing, etc. But really, it's more about costing. What would it cost you to run these three products like this or in a more production mode? So we want to have those facilities, but that's more as we get towards the production ready type deployments.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, there's that kind of dichotomy that we're aware of within Mifos Gazelle as well, that, one way this will, move into the future is looking at how it can be extended to production employments where TPS and performance is really useful. But we equally want to retain that ability to do small deployments, as we say, onto, potentially 16 gigabyte machines, and, Raspberry Pis and get to, DPI in a box type demonstrations where I don't think TPS will primarily be the concern. Actually, it will be resource utilization at that point, and how can we, support more DPGs in less resources to enable people to be able to cheaply do end-to-end testing and look at use cases.
And the underlying products have been, just to finish that off, the underlying products have been actually tested. I don't know what the figures are for PHE so for PHE Payment Hub in EE or for Mifos, but we know that Mifos is used in very, very large TPS environments. And we know that vNext has been tested and those figures have been published as well. So my point being is that the underlying products are all performance tested as well.
Excellent. We have a few questions from Devash. Firstly, should the Ingress Nginx controller be in a separate namespace, or is default good?
Yeah, that's a good question. I thought it might even be better off in the infrastructure namespace, but that may give issues with some of the cloud deployments later on, because they all connect to the Ingress controller a little bit differently. So I was happy to just take the default right at the moment. If there's a reason we shouldn't, I'm happy to hear about that.
Excellent. The next part of the question is, have we configured monitoring yet?
Not sure what sort of monitoring there is. Oh, the Prometheus and the utilization and things. It's sort of yes and no. So some things are monitored and some things aren't. And in fact, let me just show you what's been my last really fairly significant unit of work. I'm going to share my screen here actually, because I do need, and I hope this is, I apologize to anybody, this is too small. But at the heart of Payment Hub EE is the Camunda or the ZB workflow engine. And all of that goes into, all of the data from there goes into the operate tool now. So I said to you all the This is all deployed from the run.shell again. And you can see here, I've got some workflow. And David, this is just a thing of beauty. See where that thing is? It's all through that workflow. I've been battling with this for a little while, folks, to get all the data flowing. So this is monitoring the workflow, but also I said to you that where are we? I should be able to go to Kibana, Kibana.mifos. And you'll see, right, again, this is all deployed for you. And actually, it's all configured for you as well. So we should be able to, yeah, that's a bug. The data, you should actually be able to see the data in here, but I think that I must have turned that off. But you get the idea. Now, so what I was alluding to here is that there's a lot of monitoring going on from Elasticsearch, both from vNext, from Payment Hub EE, and I'm not as familiar with Mifos X, so I'm not exactly sure where the monitoring happens for there. Will we want to be able to monitor from one product to the next? And the answer to that is yes, but that is a separate project which probably would need open telemetry or something like that. And I think that would be really worthwhile potentially from the demo perspective as well. There you go. I hope that makes some sense. It's a long answer, but I hope it makes some sense.
Excellent. Thanks, Tom. And then the last part of the question is, do you have an architecture so that we understand where vNext, where Mifos Gazelle, where Payment Hub, etc., all sits, and are they dependent on each other?
So no, we actually don't. So this is a two-part answer. One is no, we don't actually have the diagrams and yet, and the flows. And that's because we're actually between release 1.0 and 2.0. 1.0 is about deploying the products, and release 2.0 is going to be demonstrating those products and the workflows between them. And so once we have the demonstrations done, and this was the original idea, actually from my son Lewis, is we want to make the demonstrations so drop dead obvious that the architecture and the flow and the use cases are very, very well illustrated. Should we have some diagrams to go with that? Probably. But that's how I see that going, and I do expect us to have that in the release 2.0 timeframe. Yes, in fact, actually that's what I'm working on most, because it'll come directly from the end-to-end demonstrations.
Excellent. Our next question is from Nafanja. I read in the slides that Gazelle is currently used for demo, testing, and proof of concept. Does this mean it should or should not be used in production?
It should not currently be used in production. Do not yet put any sort of real or business data that is business critical data through the components deployed by Mifos Gazelle. And here's a really big caveat. Mifos X is being used by lots of banks and many, apparently millions of customers throughout the world. So it's bulletproof. It's very mature. Payment Hub is being used as well. And the vNext switch is going to be, or a version of the vNext switch is going to be in production very shortly, and that will be bulletproof and tested. But the deployment done of those products by Mifos Gazelle is not doing security, is not doing high availability, is not considering disaster recovery. And for those reasons, please do not put real transactions through things deployed by Mifos Gazelle. It's not its initial value point.
Excellent, thanks, Tom. The next question we got: what sort of transaction types is Payment Hub dealing with?
That's probably a question for a
Do
Payment
you want
Hub
me? You want me
expert.
to answer that one a little
Yeah,
bit?
thanks,
I don't think
David.
expert's the right word. So I think at the moment what we're looking at within the demos and the end-to-end transactions Tom is looking at is basic payment flows. But Payment Hub is a core and connectorized type solution. So it can actually handle all sorts of different payment types depending on what connectors you configure and how you do it. So, for example, it has a connector into Mifos X, as you're seeing, to be able to do transactions into Mifos X. But equally, it has connectors to be able to connect into M-Pesa and many other sort of payment types. Payment Hub also has connectors that are able to connect to other systems that you might want, depending on the sort of end-to-end flows you're doing. So, for example, if you were setting up a loan, you might actually want to interact with a credit scoring mechanism, and you can have connectors for connecting to different credit scoring systems, etc. So Payment Hub is quite flexible in that sense, and you can develop easily new connectors to new applications you want. And I guess that also highlights, here we're talking mainly about deploying all three components through Mifos Gazelle. At the moment, you can, we will always support that you can deploy a selection of the components as well in the options and in the profiles that I think Tom will be coming on to in a minute.
Oh, I'm
Uh,
really glad you mentioned that. Let me just, before I go, I think we've only got about 10 minutes to go, don't we, David?
We've got
Um,
about 10 minutes to go, and there's one more question which I think will feed into what you're about to show as well, about which is
okay
there
on.
any GUI for
Right.
demos? So if you bear that in mind when you start talking about profiles, GUIs, and things like that, that would be great. Thanks, Tom.
Yes, well, I hoped I showed some of the GUIs, but what we don't have yet is the wallet from customer one, bank one, and to
Mhm.
the wallet from customer two, bank two, and showing the transaction going from end to end, and the bank balance from one customer actually going up, and then the details going through the switch and being audited by the switch. We don't have that GUI and that flow yet, but we've got many components of it. And I hope I showed you the Mifos X UI, the VNext UI. There's an Ops UI, Elasticsearch, everything for monitoring. So we don't have something that's end to end yet. That is what we are working on right now. That is our sort of our number one priority. And we're actually starting to make some good progress towards that end. So the first one's going to be the longest one. The rest of it's actually, I think once we've got the first demonstration, and everybody really can have something concrete to look at and play with, I think it will really be very attractive and help you, or even better, your customers or your users go, oh, that's what I should be using this for. That's what that can be done. That's what can be done with those products. Oh, this is where our product might fit in. But I do want to just share, I'll just share very quickly, my Firefox again. I mentioned, say, just take something like, because it has a nice UI, you can install the VNext switch on its own, and you don't need anywhere near 32 gigs for that. You can install Payment Hub EE on its own, or you can install Mifos X on its own. And you might actually want to do that. Or remember in those utilities, you can install Mifos X with Gazelle, and then you can add tenants very easily. But one of the things that I wanted to show you in the README, if I go back to the top level README, you'll see that I've actually documented a vNext README. I need to do this for Mifos X, and I'm not sure that it makes any sense to run Payment Hub EE on its own because it's a connector for other things. But if you go to the vNext README, it'll show you just how to run only the vNext beta. And as we get further further enhancements on the vNext switch, you'll probably be more and more interested in actually doing that. Similarly, you could do the same thing with Mifos X. I just haven't documented it yet. So for instance, all you would do here is you would use -a Mifos X. And it's actually in the README. This is worth touching on really quickly as well. I'm going to go back to code. If you go to the Mifos Gazelle, this is my workspace. And if you go sudo /run.sh-h, it actually gives you pretty good advice on and examples on the deployment options. And for dev test, remember, we want to use this for dev test and for labs. We want to be able to use it so you can put it in your CI/CD pipeline. And we've tried to make sure there's nothing that is absolutely interactive, that you can't put it in a shell script, that it will so that you can put it in a CI/CD pipeline without difficulty. Well, I can do something like -u Mifos u, that's my user, -m. What mode am I in? I'm in deploy, or actually clean apps. If I wanted to just say undeploy Payment Hub, that would just undeploy Payment Hub. So yes, very much it's trying to be convenient so that you can install and uninstall and reinstall different components very easily, and they will come up and integrate themselves into the deployment. That's definitely a use case that we are catering for. So I'll just go back to the slides real quick. We'll find PowerPoint. I will go back to play from current slide. That's our code. So opportunities, I like to think, for Gazelle are not limited to, but include, end user customers for each of the DPGs. In our case, Payment Hub, vNext, Mifos X, so that they can actually see these things rapidly deployed and used in demonstrations. Again, the real goal with the demonstrations is to show people the value add that this is bringing. I can imagine integrating, and we'll touch on this in a minute, with an FRMS system, a fraud and risk management system for payments. And you could bring that in and show transactions actually being held up and the rules being applied to show where a transaction might be suspicious. So instead of having to describe that, we could actually showcase it very easily. That's just one example. But the other opportunities are if you have a DPG, if you have software, similarly, I care about Mifos and Payment Hub EE, the stable of the stable of products from Mifos. But if you're from a company that looks after another digital public good, then you might want to integrate with Mifos X. And that way you can also be part of the demonstration, the rapid deployment environment, the lab environment, the CI/CD, all of the things that and the simplicity. And ideally with the deployment, you could be breaking down barriers, and you can be part of the demo environment. And I think the opportunities, and there are more than this, but I think there's two main types. One is type 1, which I've just shown you, which is you run the run.sh and the digital public goods are deployed. So it's a deployer. So if you like, if you look at the three initial, I can't do that, can I? If you look at the three initial DPGs that we deploy, when the user executes run.sh, then DPG, a new DPG, a new product, a new software package could also be cloned in and deployed. Initially, we're assuming Kubernetes or Docker, and the result of that would be a set of running and accessible user applications, right? Running pods and user applications. So that's type 1. That's what we've looked at. But I think if you own or are part of an organization that has a DPG, I think there's type 2. So if on the left box in light blue, you see the current deployment, the type 1 deployments of the digital public goods, and then type 2 integration is where that might work with potentially your cloud deployment of your digital public good. Let's call it digital public good Y, DPGY. And that could create a very quick and a very useful demonstration environment of your digital public good for your clients, which I've tried to just represent on the right-hand side. And that's brought about because of the rapid up and down of all the infrastructure that would help show off your digital public good. I just mentioned the example of a fraud and risk management system. I think this would be a very good example of a type 2 integration. David, does that make sense? Does that?
Yes, no, makes sense to me. Thanks, Tom.
Okay. Hopefully, any questions, just drop them in. I'll just finish up and we'll deal with any other questions. But I hope that makes sense, because I think it's a really nice opportunity. The current integration environment for Mifos Gazelle 1.0 and 2.0, i.e. our current release and the next one, we're assuming today cloud native. Deploy to deploy a single Kubernetes cluster and deploy the DPGs to that single Kubernetes cluster. In our case, right at the moment, it's Rancher K3s. It'll be recent Kubernetes releases on a recent Ubuntu OS. Doesn't matter where that Ubuntu OS is running, by the way. It might be in Windows Server for Linux, or whatever the Linux facilities are under Windows. It might be on your laptop. It might be in a virtual box or any sort of VM. It might be in the cloud. As long as it's an Ubuntu OS with 32 gigs of RAM, about 50 gigs of disk space, and currently x6486 architecture. And I outlined, as I was showing you the running cluster, the shared infrastructure layer, the database, Elasticsearch, Kibana. So these are our assumptions today. In the medium term, we definitely plan to incorporate managed clouds, Azure Kubernetes Services, Google Cloud Platform, Oracle Kubernetes Engine, Elastic Kubernetes System, etc., and ARM. Very much a pet project is to have this running on Apple and Raspberry Pi, Apple Mac, Apple ARM processors. And but really, the reason for talking about what's current and medium term is to really prompt the question of, if you do have a digital public good that you're looking after or selling or supporting, then for your customers and for your software, what things do you need? What does our assumptions look like? Do they look reasonable? Do they look not enough for your platform? Do they, can you work with that approach? Look, it's a conversation starter. Let us know what you think it might take to do a type 1 or a type 2 integration with your DPG. And I'm trying to move slides here. We've outlined our current thinking for how to do a type 1 integration in the Gazelle Jira, and it's that ticket there. That we should drop that into the Slack. Actually, I'll put it in the Slack. Just before we do any final Q&A, let me give you some resources. I really would love you to try it out and then join the Mifos Slack channel and let me know what you and let me know if it broke. Actually, what I'd love to say is I'd like to get you to let everybody know if it breaks and let me know if it works really well. But in all honesty, I need to know if it breaks. But we'd all love to know if it actually works really well and what you might be thinking of doing with it. There's the mail group and the Dev Mifos Gazelle Slack channel. There's a few videos there and the Jira, which is really important. Go to that Jira and browse through the tickets. Particularly, it's an open source product. I'd be doing the wrong thing if I didn't put in a plug for we love volunteers, and there's a number of tickets here which would really add to the user experience and to speed up the development and maturity of Mifos Gazelle. I think that's it. And just to say any more, I'm just gonna stop that and just really quickly. I know we're over time. I was going to show you the Jira and go through our type 1 deployment, but I think I'll stop there and just throw for any other questions and ask David to close us out.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah. If you have any other questions, please do put them in the Q&A. If not, please do, sort of get in touch with Tom, myself, or any of the rest of the community. Tom's given the Slack links there. You can also get in touch with us via email or through LinkedIn or any of the normal methods, and we'll make sure you get in touch and into the right circles to discuss it. I don't think, we've got any other questions coming up at the moment, Tom. Really huge thank you, Tom, for taking us through this and all the work you've done alongside the other contributors over the last 2 and a bit years to get us to this point. It's something I'm very excited about, as you know. So I think it's great, and I think what it will achieve over the next few years is going to be huge, not just for Mifos, but hopefully for everybody, and for financial inclusion. So thank you very much for the time today you've spent with us. If you do want to review this afterwards, we will have the recording up on our YouTube channel later, and we will put a link on the LinkedIn for Mifos Initiative as well, so that you should be able to get to that nice and easily. But if you have any other questions for us, please just drop us a note, get in touch on Slack, and we'd love to get you connected. We'd love you to try it out. We'd love you to volunteer or give us ideas for where you wanted to go as well. We're very open to that. So thank you, Tom. Any other final comments from yourself?
No, thank you very much for your time, folks. I really hope I hope that's of interest to you, and I hope to hear from you on our Slack.
Excellent. Thank you for joining. We have another webinar coming up in a few weeks' time looking at mobile applications, and we'll send out details of that after the call as well. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.